You are watching Xirtus.
The most ordinary type of flour. You take the grain, put it in the mill, grind it, and what you get is flour.
Well, I'll make the intro this way then. So I remember in America in the 1890s, we have this thing called the Great Flour Mill Explosion, and
Yeah.
it's because there's gluten in flour, and there's essentially a huge amount of stored energy in flour. And when a certain amount of static electricity or friction to electricity causes a spark, then the spark can cause flour to explode. So in food, there's a tremendous amount of energy, right? And we refine it, and we make both bread and bombs from wheat and flour. So on that note, let me introduce Michael, who's interested in the power of food. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I can I can give you an explanation for the explosion. It's not flour, but it's flour dust.
Okay.
So when you have saturated air and then you have fire, then it burns pretty well. These I don't know what's
Oh,
called
the
in English.
oxygen is feeding on the. There you go.
Because you have these small particles, they burn really well. People who spit fire use flour, for example,
Interesting.
So
not
if you
so
would allow me,
disgusting as gasoline.
just in
And it's
terms of
highly explosive. It's highly explosive. When I was in parliament in Austria, I brought 1 kilogram of flour and they checked for weapons, but
Wow.
the flour was no problem. And then when I met the officials, I really had to laugh because it was like, so do you know, like 1 kilo of flour, this could do a lot of damage. But
Yeah, can you imagine a more menacing character than the Pillsbury Doughboy? This guy right here, just ready to start a fire, just wants to set the world ablaze. Raph, you look like you were about to say something.
Indeed. So if I may, just to give a general introduction. So I met Michael a few years ago, just as I met you a few years ago, Andreas. And Michael told me this wonderful story about wheat processing and that in the 1850s, and he will get more into the story, they industrialized or industrially started removing the seedling from any type of wheat, And lo and
ah,
behold, guess what? This happened around 1850 when all kinds of other strange things. I just recently looked up on Wikipedia. Who can believe this? 1848. It even says the year of revolutions. And then it says, in completely unrelated fashion, 50 countries had revolutions during that year. I mean, what is going on? This was also the time when this wheat processing thing was changed. And
Mm,
he just told me that obviously all the good stuff is in there. And that is why if you just start removing that industrially, you don't tell anybody, people will, in a sense, start starving. Because
yeah.
before they got all their nutrients, everyone check out the website, goldkeim.com, and you can read up all about it. And then they basically start starving. And even if they don't know what's going on, they're going to be more angry. They're going to be more anxious. They're going to be more in a scarcity based mindset, which of course is super important for divide and conquer control structures. And my idea was simply that we line this up also with his astrological knowledge about the Pluto cycles, which is something quite interesting, and line up the wheat processing, the Pluto cycles, and whatever Andreas or the chat can throw in terms of what other events happen during that time, and see if we can correlate it. Because, of course, in my mind, there are no coincidences, even if not everyone involved is aware. There's something going on there, and I want to see how this matches up.
Right. Yeah. So I was thinking about food in terms of bread being the number one diet for virtually everyone in Europe. And it was something like it was like a kilo of bread or 2 kilos of bread or more a day, at least. Right. And living off of bread. So clearly, bread was healthier if they were able to do that and live off mostly that. Right.
There is even just one brief example, the Weston Price Foundation, when I was researching nutrition, and it was almost impossible to find any independent information, right? But Weston A. Price is this foundation, and they went to differing indigenous groups, as they call them. One of them, coincidentally, was some kind of mountain tribe in Switzerland, and all they were eating all day was some kind of cheese, and
Mm,
they ate bread.
yeah.
But they had perfect teeth, perfect teeth. everyone wants perfect teeth, you know? So you got to wonder what kind of minerals, aside maybe from the air and not having so much stress and not so many EMF, but still there must be something even within the simple food that is perfectly able to sustain them if prepared properly, and most likely not industrially destroyed as we are doing it as default.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, so Michael, what do you think about that? Do you think that there's what do you, about health and food in general?
Well, I like to compare it with cars and petrol. It's, for some reason, it's easier to understand for most of the people that if you put the wrong fuel in the car, it doesn't work. So our bodies are more advanced. We can go on that, but it has some side effects. It was 1864, I think, was a new invented way of grinding grains. And to me, like, how to say, like one highlight in the whole story was that it was not just wheat or like bread grains. I don't know how you call it in English. In German, it's bread grains. Like the grains you make bread out is a bread grain. And
like
we
bread.
have different kind
Yeah.
of grains.
I think Germans have more specific words for everything, but we probably have a word somewhere in some dictionary we don't use very often or something. I don't know.
So the whole story started with rice. And when they started to do industrialized rice peeling, this is when the story started. It started a little bit earlier than this new type of grain processing. And also with maize, corn.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, shucking the corns and things.
You can't degerminate millet because it's too small. You can't get the germ out. But it turned out that, like, basically the majority of people who lives on grains lost the germ, which is the most important part. So if you have to decide if you go for bran, germ, or the carbs, you should throw away the carbs because carbs are very easy to supplement. Like everything has in plants, everything there is some kind of sugar or plant carbs. But the density of minerals and vitamins, amino acids in the germ is enormous. I did a calculation in Austria. We eat 89 kilos a year of grain.
Wow.
And the amount in germ and bran would be 7 grams per day. So you would have 7 grams per day more vitamins, amino acids, and minerals, and other stuff we don't know. Because if we take the known ingredients that are in the germ and put it together, it won't grow. There will be no plant coming out. So, I really like this scientific approach, but the basic thing is missing, is this life.
So what is it about the germ? What is the germ itself? What is the part of it that is?
The germ would be the baby of the grain. You have the plant, you have the grain dies, then you can take the seeds, which would be the grain, like rice or wheat or barley, whatsoever. And if you look at the grain, you have on the bottom, there is 3% of the whole would be the germ. And then you have the food for the germ, which is flour to us. And this would be packed in the bran, which protects the whole thing.
And so
once it's
good.
If it has contact to water, it starts to sprout again.
So
and then a new plant is growing.
Is the grain is the germ of the grain, why is it what's it about it that's holding so much nutrients? Why does it have so much extra amino acid and mineral?
That I don't know.
That,
We
but
would
you're
have
saying
loved-
that you're saying the germ is like the egg almost, eh?
May I just
It's
say
the
even
yolk. If you
Yes.
compare it to the egg, it's the yolk.
Yeah. Okay.
and
Rab.
even with wheatgrass, you know, if you have wheatgrass, barley grass, like the fresh one is usually the most nutritious. And
Sure.
just generally speaking, you know, where's the most vitality within new life? And I mean, in this case, I'm not going to comment more about this, but let's just say at least it's just plants in this case, you know.
Well,
So, yeah.
but even I was gonna say it's, you know, egg yolk, you know, it kind of connects to there's a lot of rich, you know, that's where the baby is in seeds
the
in
baby.
general, right? And
It is the baby. It would be the embryo.
right. And so seed sprouts, you know, the kingdom of heaven's like a mustard seed. An activated sprouted seed tends to have healthier qualities, the special kinds of oils that are starting to be created. So I
It's
can
increasing,
imagine.
yeah. Mhm.
I can imagine there's something to that. Why did we get rid of that? Why did we stop focusing on, you know, we have all this you know, Wonder Breads and things like that. What was the reason that we cut out the germ?
From my point of view, it's a side effect of industrialized food production. So first industrialized mill was in America. I think it was 1798 or so. But it was still grinding with stones. And 1860 around, there was the roller mills.
Hmm.
Is this a familiar term? It's like
Right.
two like mills, and they go this way. And from my research, it was close, like at the same time, invented in Europe and in America.
Someone says
Is
I'm a
there-
breatharian in training. Thoughts? You know, have you heard of the breatharian thing? Katie.
Yeah?
Katie says that. Katie, I'd say enjoy some snacks while practicing breatharianism, because I remember there's a story about. Okay, do you know what breatharianism is? Really quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so breatharianism was this cult of people that said they could live off nothing but air and sunlight, right, and switch to full photosynthesis. And one of the most famous breatharian cult leaders was from Santa Cruz, California, where Robert Anton Wilson and crazy people like me are from. And they basically found them at a McDonald's, the leader of the breatharians, and they're like, "What? I thought you said you didn't have to ever eat food." And they're like, I don't. You think this is food? I just like it for the taste." I'm not even kidding. That really happened. But okay, sorry for the diversion.
This would be like some kind of really nasty bomb, like just the imagination. You live on sunlight and air, and then you go for a Big Mac, so it would destroy me.
Right? Yeah. It seems pretty crazy. I don't know. But what do you think about, I'm sorry, you were saying the evolution of the food processing system, and in the 1880s, I think, or 1840s,
1860.
1860s, this full transition happens where humans were living off, for the most part, the caviar of the grain. And now we're living off the shucked shells of the grain. And what was the big change? Like, what was the transition that we saw in health?
Phew. I think I don't know what we found. This was my own research. It was like a big surprise. I did a self experiment. I wanted to know why bread is a metaphor for life. It made no sense to me at all, because for 30 years I had bread. So what's the life in it?
Right. They've made bread in a prison food, right? That's all you can think of, really. Bread and water is the prison food. The two healthiest things, you know.
This would be I always thought, well, bread and water, this would be a long and painful death. A short and painful death, because you just starve basically to death. But once I got into like real bread, I said, well, hang on a second, this could take pretty long.
Right?
Because it's high density food. And the food, like like 1950s. I just saw a documentary, like traditional bread making in small villages in Germany. And they did not knead the dough, they were stepping on it.
Wow.
So it was really, really high dense bread, which lasted for a month because they only baked one time a month, and then they baked the whole bread for the month.
Whoa.
And this is like, so we don't know this kind of food. It's like nowadays you have up to 50% water at least in the dough. If you have a baguette, I think it's up to 70%. So basically what the big switch was from flour to some kind of water. It's a little bit better than a PET bottle.